murkier area. But there's no need to get into the murkier area because I'm admitting that I have some sort of threshold that there is possible consent with being married and possible non-consent with being married. But you're taking a hardline stance. So why not just look at the most simple stance, which is your wife, or for that matter, you saying, no, please don't touch me, and you get held down and forced against your will at that time. That's rape, and you don't believe it. And the last thing I'll say real quick, the reason this matters is so everyone could see what a sort of Christian authoritarianism would look like, because these are the sort of things that would happen depending on who's in charge.
Let's say that you're in the middle of having sex with your wife and she says, no, get off of me. Right? In your opinion, this is also rape. Yes. However, if you yourself are unconscious and cannot give implied consent and your wife does bad things, naughty things to you at night, that's perfectly okay.
Yes,
and
because I'm telling her that's how I feel. But if I tell her get off me...
Wait, hang on, just stop.
So I did a video where Rob Noerr was talking about Andrew Wilson and about Andrew Wilson's thoughts on marital rape. Rob Noerr said that Andrew Wilson doesn't think that that marital rape is a thing, that it shouldn't be illegal, I think. Rob Noerr talked about Andrew Wilson and what his thoughts are on it. So I was like, okay. Rob Noerr claimed that Andrew Wilson said that even if you violently raped your wife in a marriage, that is not great because of implied consent within a marriage. So I was like, I think I covered that debate, and I don't remember that. So it's true, like I stopped the debate a little bit before they got into this topic. So I'm going to cover it now. And let's see what Andrew Wilson and Rob Noerr. So now I'm going to go back and cover that section. So here's Rob Noerr debating Andrew Wilson when it comes to marriage and marital rape.
And this, that you could want to do something that is Christian, but your wife in that same situation decides to engage in sin and disagrees with you, or the inverse. Is that possible?
I mean, I suppose in the abstract it would be possible, sure.
Okay, then the idea that just because you say, my belief is that we are of one body, therefore I could do whatever I want with your body at any time, is irrelevant if your wife says, I disagree. And your only recourse to that would be like, but it would be the biblically Christian thing for her to not disagree with me. Doesn't matter what the ought is, what matters is what the is. And the is she disagrees with you, and therefore it's rape.
Hang on. Both of those things don't make any sense. Let me ask you a question, right? Let's say you get fucking drunk and you pass out. Okay. Now, I don't mean this as a shot, by the way. Your wife's lovely and you have a lovely family. So don't take this the wrong way.
She's listening, so be careful.
Okay, yeah. So let's just say you're drunk and you're passed out, okay? And your wife stimulates you and gets on top of you and does her thing, okay? And you didn't consent. Did she rape you, Ron?
Doesn't matter.
What do you mean it doesn't matter? It matters. Did she rape you or not?
Let me finish. I would say no. Because the reason I say it doesn't matter is because it's going to be up to the individual. So me as an individual will say no. But again, it's interesting that you keep using this specific. Let's say, let's take it to the logical extension. Let's say that I'm not drunk, that I'm perfectly sober.
I'm not done with my line of inquiry. I'll give it back, but I'm not done with my line of inquiry yet. So if the answer is no, this would then mean that you assume the same of her, correct?
No.
You don't assume that even though it's not rape for you, that if she was drunk and passed out, you couldn't have your way with her, even though she could have her way with you. You wouldn't assume that it was mutual?
That's correct. Just because I might think one thing for myself doesn't mean I would assume it about my wife.
That's the logical extension.
My assumption about what she would think would be based on conversations of what she feels that she's had with me in the past. If she had
like
led
a marriage
me to
vow?
But not just that. If we had a marriage vow, but she said, never touch me when I'm asleep, it doesn't matter what that vow was. It is clear to me that it's overridden by the affirmed consent that she has revoked, saying when I'm asleep, that it's not justified. Now, can I get on to what the logical extrapolation of what you're saying is? Because you keep talking about this very specific scenario, right? You're saying, well, what if someone fell asleep? Well, that's not all consent is. There could be negative consent given, right? Where someone says, I actually am verbally telling you I do not consent. It could have nothing. Because what you're talking about is interpretations of consent that we could even through a framework of just legally quibble about. Like, for example, if a guy only has 3 beers, but the girl has 10 beers, is it consent? Is she able to consent? These are questions that exist outside the scope of of religion. So when we're talking about the idea that a religious marriage through Christianity means that we're one body, therefore consent is always given, why not just take it to the logical extrapolation? You try to have intercourse with your wife and she says, "Get off me right now." You hold her down and have sex with her. Is that rape?
Yeah. No.
It's not rape?
It's
right.
not rape, no.
So then why beat around the bush with these questions of sleep?
I'm not beating around the bush. The
Yes,
logical
it is.
extension applies to you too.
No,
and
it doesn't, because they're
logic,
all
by your own logic, this also can't be rape for you.
That's not true.
For you, because if your wife pinned you down and you said no in the time, right? Then you say that wouldn't be raping you.
That's not true. That is rape.
Yeah. No. Well, why is there a difference in if you're passed out?
Because again, the
You
reason
still
is
couldn't
you're
give implied
speaking in
consent.
absolute
It's
right.
consent.
You're speaking. Let me finish, because the reason there's a difference is because you're speaking in an absolute. You're saying absolutely once you're married, consent is always applied in any situation. That means when we take
that's
it
not
to,
what I'm saying. I'm saying in a Christian marriage, if you
Right.
take the vow that you are now one flesh, how are you not one flesh?
Okay, that's what I'm saying. In your interpretation of what you're
by the way,
married,
you're getting it later. You're getting it later, whether you like it or not.
I should not laugh at that. But one more white claw to live. But you're the one who's saying under your interpretation.
Say that again. She consented. She consented.
Okay, great. Everything's copacetic. And I hear her yelling in the back. By the way, my conversations with her go much better. Definitely the talent in the family. But nonetheless, moving
You
on.
guys proceed. Andrew, are we taking callers tonight?
Of course, yeah. We'll take callers and, of course, super chats. Rob knows he's going to be here for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I
He
don't
doesn't
give a
have
shit.
choice. It's the
Listen,
Crucible.
look, my wife is prepping food and cleaning right now. If you keep me till 3 a.m, that prevents me from having to help with that sort of stuff. So I don't give a shit at all. But the difference is this. You're speaking in an absolute. You're saying under your interpretation of what marriage is, then consent is always applied, even if it is specifically revoked in the future. So even if your wife would say, "I do not consent right now," you would say, "Nope, that's overridden by the fact that we signed or we engaged in a vow of marriage, so it's overridden." When I'm talking about these situations that are different, talking about sleep and drunk and things like that, these are questions of consent that exist outside a religious perspective. So there's different levels of this. So for example, we could say, the leftists take it to an insane rationale, which is if a woman is somewhat drunk whatsoever, she can never consent. I don't agree with that. I do agree with the fact that if the woman can't verbally consent to you and there's any doubt about it, then it's not consent. Now, if you're in a situation where you're married and this is something that is coming up in the past and the wife or the husband hasn't had a problem with it, then that's different. It's a murkier area. But there's no need to get into the murkier area because I'm admitting that I have some sort of threshold that there is possible consent with being married and possible non-consent with being married. But you're taking a hardline stance. So why not just look at the most simple stance, which is your wife, or for that matter, you saying, "No, please don't touch me," and you get held down and forced against your will at that time. That's rape, and you don't believe it. And the last thing I'll say real quick, the reason this matters is so everyone could see what a sort of Christian authoritarianism would look like, because these are the sort of things that would happen depending on who's in charge.
Let's say that you're in the middle of having sex with your wife and she says, "No, get off of me." Right? In your opinion, this is also rape.
Yes.
However, if you yourself are unconscious and cannot give implied consent and your wife does bad things, naughty things to you at night, that's perfectly okay.
Yes,
and
because I'm telling her that's how I feel. But if I tell her, "Get off me,"
Wait, hang on. Just stop. Because you're telling her this. So
Right.
the implication from what you're saying is that you cannot make a pre-agreement with a person that stands in the future, even if it's in regards to your own body. And I need to know the justification of why. Why, if my wife says we're now one flesh? Why, if she says we now are one? We are in a single union. We're in a single body. You're basically telling me that I can't jerk off at that point. It's the same. That's the same extension of the logic, Rob.
No, it's
yes,
not.
That's
because,
what they've agreed
again,
to before.
Hang
on, and made their oath in front of God to that.
No, it's again. Notice how you keep running. Listen. Notice how you keep running back to the sleep exhibit because you can't defend, right, the idea that people can change their mind. So even if you swear an oath in the form of a religious ceremony in the institution of marriage,
there's consequences for.
There's not
consequences to your oath, or don't get married.
Let me ask you this:
don't get married.
Let's take a different tack then. Like, as Andrew Wilson, the person, if you choose to chop off your finger, should you be allowed?
Should I be allowed to chop off my own finger?
Yeah, if you choose Andrew Wilson to chop off your finger, should you be allowed?
I think that if intervention is possible, it should be done. Yeah.
What do you mean if intervention's possible? I'm saying you
Well, like
sincerely...
you couldn't stop me. Well, like you couldn't stop me from doing it. So I'm saying
Right,
if
so you
intervention
should be-
was possible, then yes, I would try.
So
my
since your
hardest
wife
to
is of
intervene.
one body to you, if you choose to chop off her finger, shouldn't you be allowed?
If I choose to chop off her finger, no.
Yes.
I think, like I
Why?
just said, if
You're one body.
intervention- I just said if intervention is possible, it should be done.
No, but why? What do you mean if intervention is possible? I don't understand.
Well,
Why
I
is
just-
that relevant
I just
to the
explained
scenario?
this.
It's your
So
body.
I'll explain it again. Let's say you, Rob, say, I'm about to chop off my finger. I would do everything possible within my purview and power to stop you from doing that.
Congratulations. You've just proven that Christian authoritarianism would be one of the biggest supporters of vaccine mandates.
How?
Because you're saying that if intervention is possible because people outside believe that it would be personally harmful to you to engage or not engage in an activity, then they're justified in controlling your body to intervene.
Oh, well, congratulations. You actually are the supporter of vaccine mandates because what you just stated is that a person has complete and total bodily autonomy, right? So therefore, if they have complete and total bodily autonomy, meaning the state can't step in, they can't do any of this, they can't do any of that. This is all done via a private company, right? The private company, under your own logic, can come in. And 1 second, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
I'm going to take a piss break. You go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah, that's a shame because I was laughing at you. Go, congratulations, you're for this. But what a leap that Rob made, that just because Andrew Wilson would stop Rob from chopping off his fingers, well, all of a sudden now Andrew Wilson is for the jab. So stopping Rob Noerr from chopping off his own finger is the equivalent of forcing people to get an untested jab for a disease which is not as lethal as it is portrayed to be in the media. So listen, we already caught Rob in one lie when he said that Andrew Wilson believes that he should be able to chop off his wife's body parts because they're one flesh. Well, Andrew Wilson said no, he would not chop off his wife's finger, and he doesn't believe that's correct. So Rob said in the other video that Andrew Wilson said that, but Andrew Wilson did not say that. When it comes to the marital grape thing, well, I guess it turns out, at least so far during this debate, this segment, that Andrew Wilson, even if it is like a violent, you hold her down by the throat or whatever like that and have your way with her, that is not marital grape due to implied consent.
Right. We are about 14-minute mark. I've paused again.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Uh,
Fucking gay. All right. sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Where's Rob?
he's taking a short, actually precisely at the amount of time that was allocated plus the 15 minutes of the closing remarks. 14 minutes closing remarks, roughly. So I don't know if it makes any difference to spend another minute back and forth. I think we should just probably go into closing. I'm sorry, gentlemen. We are out of time.
Yeah, there's never a fair place to stop a debate, right? So, I don't know. Who do you want to close first?
You open, so if you want, I could close first. That's normally how it works, right? Person who open, at least in policy debate, that's how we did it. Whoever speaks first speaks last. If you speak first, it's a disadvantage. So I'll go first if the closing, unless you disagree.
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
It's perfectly fine. Thank you.
All right.
I'm
7
ready to
minutes?
start. Yes.
7. Okay. I probably won't take the full 7 minutes. So what we can see here is sort of this is such a broad topic. Me and Andrew could talk about it for probably 10 hours. We'd be able to. But I still think that, the fundamental difference is sort of ideologically what we think government should be about. This is different. Believe it or not, I heard someone recently that I interviewed, who might be our moderator right now, say something very interesting about sort of the code of ethics and sort of the morality is different than what you think the legal system should be. And that's exactly what I'm saying here. My belief, and let me be clear, I'm sort of pandering to the audience, but I want to be clear, not pander. I am a Christian, but in a loose sense of the word. I am someone who believes in being Christ-like. I'm not a student of the Bible. I wouldn't even engage in that pretend to engage in that level of argumentation with someone like Andrew or Pedro or other people that argue those issues far more from an informed perspective than me. But I will say that I do consider myself a Christian. Maybe people disagree. Those labels, though, are unimportant to me because my code of ethics and my morality is different than what my ideology for what a government system ought to be. And what that government system ought to be is one that is prioritized on individual freedom and individual responsibility. And the reason is because that will allow the greatest growth of a system that allows people to make choices, even choices that are bad for themselves. And authoritarianism that sort of stops people from making those choices doesn't win hearts and minds, even in the sense of what Christianity entails. That you're supposed to voluntarily come to your walk with Christ, not because the government forced it upon you. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't laws that aren't defined by morality or based in morality that we shouldn't have. There are all sorts of them that I would agree with Andrew. Murder's bad, rape's bad, though apparently we disagree on what the definition of rape would be. Pedophilia is bad, things like that. These are things we could agree, and then obviously it gets to more nuances. We get to other sorts of laws that we may agree or disagree with. But that idea is, the fundamental difference between Andrew and I is that I believe in the idea of personal freedom and personal responsibility, and Andrew is going to believe that he wants some sort of Christian authority or Christian nationalism. You can see how things will go awry quickly. First off, he has to argue for an authoritarian system. You can see the arbitrary nature, and even as he has to backtrack, where at first it seems that he's saying, I'm against women's suffrage, but then he immediately backtracks when being pushed to say, well, actually, I'm not against women's suffrage. I just don't think that all women should be able to vote, just like all men shouldn't be able to vote, just like all white people should be able to vote, etc., because they should have to meet some sort of test. But you can see how that goes against his rhetoric that required a pushback of just the lightest touch on the idea that we should remove suffrage and things like that. One of the issues we didn't talk about was his sort of accelerationism argument that would say that we should remove the tax exempt status from churches. And I was going to talk about it. I bring it up for this reason, because oftentimes in trying to reach these overarching goals, there is this sort of ends justifies the means argument where there'll be all sorts of things. We can see conflicts that have occurred in the past. I know that there have been, you can see it clearly with the Shiite and Sunnis, right? With that sort of nationalism that comes through religion, how minor differences, even amongst people that share the same religion, have resulted in blood feuds that have lasted centuries. You can see this with sort of the orthodoxy in Russia. And we had a split ferment that saw years of bloodshed that occurred from people that believed in sort of the old way of religion versus how the religion went about going in the future. With this tax exempt status, the net effect of what Andrew suggested in, this would ultimately lead to a Christian authority coalescence that would lead to a Christian authoritarianism. In the short term, what that does is shut down the church my parents go to that subsist off of like $40, $50 of donations a month, right? If you started taxing them and force someone, they don't even have a preacher. They each volunteer, the 6, 7 members of that church, each volunteer to stand up and offer a sermon one day. The idea that the government's now going to be involved, it's not just the money they would have to pay in taxes, but to keep the books and things like that to get the government involved. It's just an unintended consequences that this rationale that, the ends justify the means lead to. You can see that there's really no pushback in how this would lead to all sorts of horrific, heinous things, such as the idea that we would have enshrined in law that I guess it would now be there would be no possibility to rape your wife. There's no reason this wouldn't apply to violence. If you committed violence, it's your body after all. You have the legal right to punch yourself in the head. And when Andrew says, and we didn't get to it, but when he says, well, intervention, if intervention's necessary, someone should intervene, it would be easy to see how under this Christian authority or Christian authoritarianism, how they would say, we know what's good for your body, and therefore we will force you to make those decisions. And it could come in the form of, I always think
cutting off your finger with no rhyme or reason to it. It's not like you have frostbite or something that's going to spread unless you cut off your finger and you have to go get it medically cut off. If you're just cutting your finger just for the heck of it, that is harmful. I don't think it's authoritarian to be like, don't cut off your body part or something like that. So, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. Not we know more than you about your body. It's like, dude, you want to cut off your own finger.
For someone that's such a lot of Christian nationalists seem to engage in things that would be sinful. Andrew, again, destroying his body by lighting up his 73rd cigarette or something here, drinking his beer as he does so. Under many forms of Christian authoritarianism, those would both be jail sentences. Now, he says when it comes to things like that, and even
I don't like those Christian authoritarians. So.
That's right. And that, which is a point we'll get to. But remember, of the two of us, I'm telling you right now that as a dirty, sinner, I absolutely am for punishment of people like pedophiles and not just rehabilitation. So you can see sort of the justification that you see through Christian authoritarianism and these heinous things. He's made arguments that are arbitrary, such as he says, well, if my church says that, the basis for it would be if they say it's okay to have sex with 12-year-olds, there's all sorts of tension with that. I'm quite clear. Any intercourse with someone under the age of 18 should be illegal with some sort of, wiggle room. Like if you're 18 in 3 days and you're having sex with a 17-year-old, that's slightly different. But those have to come with my admitting that there are threshold problems and there is sort of an arbitrary nature in everything. The problem is Andrew wants to say that he doesn't engage in that arbitrariness, but he does. It's just his arbitrariness is whatever the leader of his church tells him. And he's admitted if the leader of the church, which has happened in the past, says that intercourse is justified with 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds or 14-year-olds, then he would have to find a reason why that's acceptable or not, which would be limited by the same arbitrariness that he claims that I'm in. At the end of the day, he even says there in a joking manner, but it is ultimately the problem with this. And he says, I don't like those sorts of authoritarians. It is justified that we look and say, how could this go wrong? All forms of authoritarianism should be removed. We should limit government as much as possible and allow people to make good or bad decisions for themselves. The authoritarianism that Andrew is espousing will eventually be used for tyranny, just like the tyranny. And it's a horseshoe theory. Literally, Andrew might as well be a communist here, saying my religion of secularism and communism needs to have total authority. We need to intervene on people's personal bodies and do what we want. So I say reject the real leftist Andrew here. Embrace liberty, the Constitution, the best system that we've ever had.
Yeah, so listen, I get the sentiment Rob's going with, but the problem here is that, like, we're not ruled under like a secularist government. We're not ruled under like a Christian government right now, and there's still authoritarianism. Like, just because you're not going to have Christian authoritarianism doesn't mean you're not going to get any authoritarianism. You could still have secular authoritarianism. That's what we've had within the last few years or so with the Democrats in power. It was a form of authoritarianism, and it wasn't done with Christian values in mind. But so now the issue is, which authoritarianism would you rather have? Christian ethics or secular ethics?
You're right on time.
Rob can take the whole 7 minutes. I don't know if I'll need to. So, before unfortunately I had like a literal fire that I had to put out, but so I'm sorry I was distracted.
One moment, please.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I meant the timer.
So what I was saying before, just to tie it up, was that these people will claim endlessly that you have bodily autonomy and then claim that the state needs to step in on your behalf every fucking chance they get, right? And it's not really bodily autonomy. They're just making up bullshit and feeding it to you, right? We have bodily autonomy until we decide that the state needs to step in and take care of our bodily autonomy. When we've been going through this discussion, you notice that my opponent almost has zero justifications for the things he believes unless he adopts my worldview. And when he adopts my worldview, like I said in my introduction, he would adopt those things. By the way, you get one interruption, Rob, because I did interrupt you in your closing, and that was not great. Okay, but it was funny, so I had to do it. But anyway, he steals my worldview and he picks what he wants from it and he rejects the rest. And he says, I'm rejecting the rest because it's my preference. We got in the age of consent. He thinks that that's a win for him. It's a loss for him. He's proving over and over again that the set of values that he is governed by is completely and totally arbitrary. And he knows that it's arbitrary. He had to, in his own closing, say, oh, shit, now that I just said that, I do have to kind of backtrack and say that these are arbitrary justifications. The only real things that he can make good, solid justifications on revolve around my worldview. which is why Rob respects my worldview, contrary to anything he might say. Respects it greatly. And it's why he knows, and I know, and you know out there, if Rob's wife is in baby making mood and rolls over on him in the middle of the night and he's passed the fuck out and he wakes up to it, he ain't going to the cops, guys. I'm telling you, okay? Right now, he ain't doing it. And if he did, they should probably laugh him out, right? They should probably just kind of giggle at him and go, well, them's the ropes. Sorry that your wife raped you, right? But he won't allow me to apply the same standard in the opposite direction, right? Now, I don't believe all women. I'm not that way. Unfortunately, I've been in the real world for long enough to know that women are pretty much full of shit more often than they're not full of shit. When it comes down to the question of rape, especially marital rape, it's extremely difficult, even if you're in a courtroom, to decide. And that's because of these differences that happen when you point to, well, we're married, we have a marriage vow, there's implied consent, there's all this type of thing. He's saying, well, if you're right in the moment and she says, no, stop, man, there's a lot of women, and I'm going to tell you this honestly, who say no that mean yes. I know that sounds controversial, but they're like, no, stop. Oh, no, this is terrible. Oh, don't, no. And they don't mean any of that shit. And you all know that that's true. Not only that, but moving it forward from there, he didn't make a great case for why Christian authoritarianism is bad inherently at all. He didn't have really a justification against any of it. It was just arbitrary preferences, which is exactly what I knew it would be, from this crazy libertarian standard of personal autonomy built around some fucking constitution that's been reinterpreted 50 fucking times and is failing us massively as a society. So I'm just going to say, right, that I don't think that Rob disagrees with me on most points. Don't get me wrong, right? He really is. He's a great family man, and he's a great guy. I have the utmost respect for him, right? But we're in debate mode, and we're going to fuck each other up and fuck each other's worldview up, and that's the way it's going to be come hell or high water. But I do not believe for a second that many of the things that he brings up, he doesn't see the gray area and the nuance with, especially the vow. Remember that when a Christian gets married, they are taking a real vow. And that vow should mean something. You shouldn't be able to just be like, well, I just backtracked on it because I was like, humping the neighbor. And so I decided I wasn't going to have sex with my husband anymore. You know what I mean? No, you took a vow. When I questioned Rob on marriage, what did he say? He got tangled all up in that, right? Because he knows that it's one flesh, and he knows that the standard that he holds within his own marriage is you can't have an open marriage. That's not a real marriage. Two men getting married, that's not a real marriage. He knows what a real marriage is, and he pretty much kind of alluded to what that was. We weren't able to press on it as much as I would have liked to, but in the end, just understand that we have to have a bedrock, a foundation for which morality derives, or we don't even have a society. We end up with this hodgepodge of nonsense where we have transgender story hour and guys like Rob saying, I'll fight to the death in a foreign nation to make sure they have the right to do that. No, fuck that. That's bullshit, and it needs to stop immediately. Immediately. And that's going to take a bit of authoritarianism, and don't be afraid on the right to embrace, utilize.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Andrew had to say there, especially about embracing authority. I mean, that's why on one hand, you have all the left freaking out about us deporting, illegal citizens out of here. Now that's all authoritarianism. That's authoritarianism. And I'm like, yeah, maybe even if you're correct that it is because they're not getting the due process, we're in a situation where we let the Democrats let millions of people over the border without totally disregarding the law. They didn't have to go through the legal process. So if Trump wants to kick them out and not give them all their court dates and their due process, yeah, personally, I don't care. This is an unprecedented thing, and we have to take unprecedented measures. It's clear the left only wants us to play by the rules while they don't have to play by the rules. But going back to what Andrew's saying, I mean, he's absolutely correct about in terms of Rob, how he picks and chooses what he wants. He wants everyone the freedom to do whatever they want up until it gets too much to the extremes like murder and rape and diddling kids. And again, I want to bring up the example, like if my wife borrows my credit card and goes and buys things, and then I see it and I'm like, hey, I didn't consent to this. I didn't say you could buy this stuff. Should I report my wife to the police and say, oh, this is identity theft? I want to charge her with identity theft? Like, a lot of people would probably be like, yeah, no, that sounds a little extreme. That's the gray area with marriage. Now, I don't want to sit here and pretend that violent rape in marriage doesn't happen. I wish Andrew would have, he did say that, no, that's not great, but I would have liked to have pressed him further. But when is it too far? Because Andrew Wilson wouldn't treat his wife like that. Like, if it ever gone, Andrew Wilson wouldn't treat his wife like that. And so you have to ask, well, if it's not grape, then what is it then? Because if Andrew Wilson acknowledges that he probably wouldn't do that to his wife, okay, so he acknowledges that it's bad, right? So what should be done in those cases? Should the wife just divorce the man? What's going, what should happen in that scenario, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that's what I would like to, that's what I would like Andrew to answer, is that what does he think about those specific situations? But this was a great debate between Rob Noerr and Andrew Wilson. What did you guys think about that? Leave a comment in the comment section below. Give this video a like if you liked it. And if you really like it, please consider subscribing to my channel. You'll really be helping me out a lot. Liking this video will also help me out a lot as well. If you like seeing Rob Noerr and Andrew Wilson do their thing, I have playlists for both of them on the screen, along with a channel full of content just like this that I think you'll enjoy.